Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this exciting webinar, Accessing the Middle East Innovation Ecosystem. And our focus is on African startup this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I don't know, Fatma, should we wait a minute for the others to join? We'll just wait for about 2 minutes for the others to join, and then we'll start.
Okay.
Right. Wow. It's interesting. We have attendees from Nigeria, from Kenya, UAE, South Africa,
and Peru.
Peru. Interesting. All right. Oh, great. Thanks, Fatma. Maybe we'll just wait 30 more seconds and we'll be starting. Right, yeah. Okay. All right, I think we have quite a good number on the Zoom webinar, and I'm going to start all over again. I'd like to welcome everyone to this exciting webinar. We've been looking forward to it ourselves. From myself, my name is Hazel Sibanda. I'm a project executive here at Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park, and I would like to welcome all of you to this exciting webinar on Accessing the Middle East Innovation Ecosystem, African Startups Edition. This webinar, we've designed it to provide African startups with valuable insights on accessing the innovation ecosystem and opportunities within the Middle East ecosystem. So get ready to be inspired and learn about the exciting world of innovation, entrepreneurship in Africa and the Middle East. We've gathered a panel of experts from the region and also from Africa to share insights.
بس أنا عندي I'm on a call, but هذا ما هي ريبوز قاعدين هناك already.
Sorry, Motas, can you mute?
Oh yes, my apologies.
Apologies for that. We have gathered a panel of experts from both regions to share insights and experiences to discuss the challenges and opportunities within the two regions. So without wasting much time, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. We have Dr. McLean Sibanda, the Managing Director and Board Member of Beacon Global. He's also the ISP Board Member. He's an author and an avid innovation promoter. We have Sigan Cole, who's the founder of Funding the Gap, an ecosystem builder, a venture partner, and a VC scout based in Nigeria. We have Motaz Ben Saudi, who's our Director of Business Development here at Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park here in the UAE. And also we have Ian Edgar, our Head of Learning and Partnerships, also here at Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park. I'd like to welcome you all, our panelists, our attendees, and we look forward to an interesting, engaging. We've actually made this webinar more interactive. We want to engage the attendees and the panelists at the same time to have a more interesting webinar. So without wasting much time, we're going to delve into it. Dr. McLean, I'm going to start with you. If you can just briefly give us a run of what's the status of the African innovation ecosystem right now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hazel, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone that's dialing in, depending on where you are. So it's a great pleasure to be part of this particular panel and a very important discussion in terms of the African innovation ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And many people may ask why the emphasis on Africa. I think we're looking at about 1.4 billion population today. Over the next 20 so years, Africa is going to add another billion of people to a population of about 2.5 billion. If we look at the recent demographics by the UN, the rest of the world is in essence either aging or has stopped. Latin America, Caribbean, Europe, and Northern America and Oceania is really what we're seeing is an aging population. Today, Africa has probably about 40% of the population is under the age of 15. And it's projected that moving forward, we're going to see by 2030, around 1.3 billion people on the planet to be aged between 15 and 24. And most of those will be in Africa and Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look in terms of how the ecosystem has changed over the last years, there's been a lot of influence, obviously, by digitization. The mobile connectivity has allowed for more people to be connected, has allowed for more innovations to happen. With the young population, they're also looking for alternative ways of employment. Also in the midst of rising unemployment, but also what we've seen is a decline in terms of the large corporations that typically provided employment. So there's been a rise in terms of looking for solutions within the continent. And so if one looks at some of the reports, Britta Bridges has done some interesting reports, AfriLabs also done some interesting reports. We see, in essence, the rise in terms of just entrepreneurial flair within the continent. East Africa being led by Kenya, West Africa being led by Nigeria and Ghana, and then Southern Africa being led by South Africa. So, and then Northern Africa being led by Egypt and what we call in essence, the Big Four.
Yeah.
And these, in essence, provide the hubs for a lot of the technologies in the continent, and most of them, about 40%, is in essence digital, largely around fintech, around e-commerce, retail, e-health, e-education, and agri-tech, as well as more recently, energy.
Okay, if I'm interesting facts there, Doc. Yeah, you mentioned there are lesser large corporations investing in African ecosystem. Are African startup ecosystems worth investment in terms of return on investment? If I can just add that question there.
Absolutely. I think when one invests in startups, in essence, what you're investing in is investing in the founder. Because with the right founder, they'll go on to come up with new innovations because the founders see the opportunity. In essence, so with the young population in Africa, much of it is actually very much digital aware. We're seeing a lot of investment. In fact, I think the recent reports show that Africa reached, I think, the largest investment in recent years in 2022. Much of it in the Big Four areas. We're seeing a lot of the African startups going also offshore into the US and different jurisdictions. much of the problems that are being solved are problems that have got a market. Bearing in mind, I said it's a 1.4 billion market currently in Africa, projected to grow. But also the challenges that one sees in Africa, they're elsewhere, in other developing parts of the world. And what we're also seeing is a lot of opportunities and innovations that have got opportunities to scale in the areas that I've highlighted, particularly in the fintech area.
Okay, and I'll squeeze in one more question. We hear a lot of startups mentioning funding as the biggest challenge within. Do you think funding is the biggest challenge in especially African startups? And would funding solve the challenges in the ecosystem itself?
So funding is not everything, but funding quite often is a difference between success and failure. Let me clarify. There's a lot of funding that's actually available for startups, but the funding that is missing is a funding for proof of concept. Small amounts of money, anything from probably $50,000 US dollars to about maybe $1 million US dollars. That is the kind of funding that actually is missing. To provide proof of concept, to demonstrate that the idea can scale. The other things that are required is, in essence, to make sure that you've got founders that are entrepreneurs. Also, technologies that can scale, perhaps looking at platform technologies on which one can build, on top, as opposed to one-hit, wonders. And then, much importantly for me, is access to market. And I think that's really what this conversation is about.
Yeah.
The collaboration across the different regions provides access to markets for entrepreneurs that might be sitting in Botswana, for example, with a population of 2 million people. And then suddenly they can access 200 million people in Nigeria, or so many billion people in India or China.
Interesting, such interesting facts. I'm going to hop over to you, Segun. Maybe if you can give us a West African perspective on the African startup ecosystem. How has it evolved in recent years?
Yeah, thank you, Hazel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, just like Dr. McLean has said, what we've seen over time in the West African region, but not just West Africa, but across the African continent, we've been a slow and at the same time rapid uptake in things like mobile penetration, internet connectivity. And with that, then you now start having a lot of kind of shift in the understanding of tech, and also the involvement of stakeholders in the ecosystem. So then we started seeing the likes of InterSwitch, so they're seeing the likes of Paga, so they're seeing the likes of most recently M-Pesa, which I believe is is a foundational player in the African tech ecosystem. And then now you have the likes of Jumia. All this has been made possible because of mobile penetration and internet connectivity, the right infrastructure that has now spawned a lot of innovation and tech in the ecosystem, and also attracted investment from the foreign investment community. So you saw that likes of Stripe acquisition of Paystack. I think that was $200 million. And then we saw the IPO of the likes of Jumia. Jumia now in like 14 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And now you have a lot of attention coming into not just Africa, but West Africa as well. and quite impressive. As a whole, in Africa, we did, depending on who you listen to, between $5 billion to $5.3 billion. Now, last year, we're seeing figures of $6.5 billion, right? Even in the face of a bear market, and hopefully in 2023, we should be seeing between $7 to $8 billion.
Interesting. Yeah, I noticed you mentioned a couple of startups that have made it big, like Paystack. I'm just wondering, what are some of the, those are some of the most successful startups within the African ecosystem. How have they overcome the challenges that other startups face in the ecosystem? If you may elaborate on that.
Yeah, so speaking of a company like Jumia, in an environment where you have a low credit card penetration, right? So we saw Jumia deploy something called cash on delivery, right? Where you can actually pay for this item when you receive it, right? And in that way, they really solved a very big friction in the ecosystem, because even, I'm sure I speak for the rest of Africa, but even West Africa, you hear people say, hey, look, if I don't see this item, then I'm not paying for it. So what do you do as a company? Do you say, oh, okay, you know what, since you don't have a credit card, or you're not going to be leveraging mobile money, then we're not going to sell to you. So Dr. McLean's even smiling because it's so true. So they had to deploy cash on delivery. They also had to partner mobile money operators. And I think that really helps them a lot. The likes of Flutterwave as well, payment infrastructure, they also had to partner the telcos, right? And also partner mobile money operators as well. And that goes for the Paystacks and the M-Pesas. Most of them even partnered regulators. You know, they partnered the banks, because that was just the only way to maneuver this stock challenges.
Great stuff, great stuff. If I understand clearly, partnerships and collaborations have been big on the success of many successful startups within the ecosystem. So if I can ask you again what I asked Doc as well, what do you think is the biggest challenge that African startups face, and what can be done to address it, to foster a more conducive ecosystem for innovation to thrive?
Right. So I would say it's the biggest challenge that startups has faced in Africa, right, has been funding and access to capital, right? Rightly said by Dr. McLean, it's all too much being in the. I speak to startups every day. I still spoke to startups this morning, right? And when they're engaged, they're like, hey, we're trying to raise capital for, okay, do you have an MVP? No. Have you built anything? Oh, we've done 20% of our product development, but we need capital to do. But investors, even early stage investors, are not interested in you if you haven't gotten your prototype or your MVP. So that disconnect, right? So over time, I for one have been working with some players. One of them has been GIZ, to see how we termed it creative capital. And creative capital is that, look, these funders enter into partnerships with the likes of development companies, right? And instead of giving the startups funding, they give the development companies funding and say, okay, you know what? Help them develop this product. Right. So in that way, the product is out of the way and they can now have the conversations with the investors. So we need to see more of creative capital from DFIs, VCs, private equity firms, corporate VCs as well. I think this kind of great capital is going to spawn a lot of support for startups. Not only that, it has to be public-private partnerships, right? The government also has a huge role to play, right, in supporting this ecosystem, right? Many people might not know, but why India is India today in terms of the Indian venture capital ecosystem is because the government of India had an agreement with the World Bank and said, look, we need to set up venture capital funds, and 4 funds were set up. And most of the unicorns you see coming out of India today were funded by these 4 venture capital funds. So we need to see more active support in that regard. Another huge problem has been in the areas of understanding of startup and venture capital in Africa, and this is across board, right? You have a very nascent local investment community that most don't even know what is. You talk about tech and like, what's that? But you talk about stocks and bonds, and it resonates with them. So the needs, I call it startup evangelism or venture capital evangelism, where we need to start orientating, right, this local investment community to understand that, look, there's something called the tech ecosystem, and this is how we can support it. So, and we need to see more of incubators and accelerators. I don't think we have enough. There's a debate where you say, do we have enough accelerators? Do we need enough, or do we need less? I believe we need more of them, right? But more efficient ones that understand the unique challenges that the ecosystem faces, and they can come up with solutions for it. And yeah, more collaboration.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And just one more question I'm going to squeeze in. I would not have done this webinar justice if I don't ask it. How do we get to improve gender participation to ensure that more female founders, we have more female founders, especially in both ecosystems? I'll pose this to Dr. Buckley.
Yes, I mean, the gender, challenge is real. I think diversity is an issue. A recent study, I think it was the African Tech report for 2022, demonstrated that the leaders in this particular case, interestingly, is actually Kenya. Kenya is ahead of the curve with about 26% of the funded, startups having at least one female founder. And they're followed by Morocco at 25%, and then South Africa 23%. Go down to Ghana at about 17%. So a number of things I think that we need to do. First of all, is to really understand why there are less female, founders, so that we're actually solving for the right, kind of problem. But also understand context. Context is quite important because most of these countries is still, patriarch kind of society, and women are expected to, to look after the home. They're, expected after work to go and do all sorts of things and look. So funding becomes important so that we provide enough funding as well for the female entrepreneurs, founders, to actually spend enough time working in the business. The other thing is to perhaps start to encourage, particularly in the incubators, to encourage more women participation, maybe run specific women led kind of programs. There's a program called Share Equity, run by Pauline Coble, and that focuses purely on female founders. So we have to be addressing, solving for the problem. And I think the beauty about having more female founders or co-founders in these businesses is that, and it's been demonstrated that they tend to actually, move much more quicker and solve for problems at scale.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now I'll move on to you, Motaz. If you can briefly speak on the UAE innovation ecosystem, just for briefly on that.
Absolutely, and thank you, Hazel. So for UAE, I'd like to start with, let's say, a top-down approach, okay? What is the UAE? I mean, how is it handling everything? And then we go down to, let's say, what is there for the startups itself. So as you're aware, you know, UAE is a very transparent country, and I think that sets a very good ground for companies to come and establish themselves here. We have really a state-of-the-art banking system, which facilitates, you know, the process of interaction. UAE is very strategically located, with, you know, having direct connections with Africa, Asia, you know, the whole Middle East as a region, and Europe, of course. And of course, on top of that, with excellent diplomatic ties, it facilitates that for the startups and the companies that establish here to work with the region and beyond, really. So UAE has set itself to become a scale-up nation, okay? And this is very important. With having that in mind, you know, means that we wanted to facilitate the ground, you know, for a company to come here to scale into this region, as well as scale outside of this region. We have companies with us right now that have moved to Africa. You know, we have a company called Spacewide. They're doing large network infrastructures in different countries in Africa. So we see many examples of these companies that start here or scale into this region and then continue to scale out of the region. So again, as a country, UAE facilitated that. And when it comes to, let's say, funding or acquiring funding for companies, UAE still by far leads in the region. Okay, just to give an example, in the first half of last year, according to the Magnet studies, you know, over 700 million was injected into startups. And then by the end of the year, it exceeded 1.5. So again, and this happens on many levels. The government itself can be injecting funds. And then, of course, as the team have been discussing, you have the whole network of venture capitalists, and then the angel investors, and the parks themselves. You know, us as a park, we also invest in companies. And maybe I'll give you a couple of examples which happened. One of them was this morning, okay? We don't do it for every company, but there was a certain startup that we're very interested in. Okay, and we said, you know what, we want to be part of this company so that we help them grow, and obviously, you know, we'll have them here at the park, and you know, we'll grow together. So again, as a country, UAE has set itself as a scale-up nation, and this is what is attracting a lot of the companies here. There's different focus areas, okay? The prominent ones is fintech, agriculture or agritech, retail, healthcare, and logistics. Okay, so these are essentially the main sectors that are being focused on here in the region. Of course, as you know, agriculture, you think agriculture in a you know, desert environment and so on.
Yeah.
And as everyone knows here, it's changing completely. I mean, we have a nano farm being built right here next to us. We do vertical farming and so on. So maybe we'll get to a stage where Spain is buying tomatoes from us, you know, so.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, you know, there's a lot of capital injection also helping, you know, these companies, you know, scale up into the region.
Absolutely, and interesting as well. And maybe a little bit about our SRTIP, Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park ecosystem, and what we do to support startups and entrepreneurs. Just briefly on that, if you may.
Absolutely. I'm going to start with three things, and then maybe I'll go into the park. What do companies want? You know, startups want? You know, it could be funding, it could be connections, or it could be a setup, right? Or all of these, right? Or a combination of these. So this is really what we provide here as a park. So what are we? We are a technology park, essentially focused on technology. Our mandate, we're a government entity. Our mandate is to bring innovations into UAE and beyond, okay? So it's not just UAE, it's to establish companies here, but help them also grow into the region next to us and perhaps even beyond that. So, of course, you have scale-ups, coming into this region. They don't know what is the first step to do. So in order to facilitate that, we created landing pads where we do everything in-house from A to Z, from setting up the company to doing the visas, to opening the bank accounts. Everything is done in-house, except the bank accounts. It's just done with partnership with different banks, of course. But we facilitate the process for the companies to be here. So just to highlight a couple of very important things. I mentioned, what the company needs. One of the main things needed is the exposure. A company wants to be exposed. And this is just advice to every company out there, is to be located in a place where you get exposure, because essentially this is what's going to help the company grow. So we focus on that. We are I wouldn't call it a niche, but we don't want 30,000 companies or 40,000 companies to be part of the park, but rather a more focused, where we can help these companies grow. Okay, because essentially this is our mandate. So we, as an accelerator, we help connect these companies to other government entities or organizations. We help connect them to academia, because right next to us here, we have 22 universities. Okay, we are immediately next to a university city with 22 universities and 46,000 students. And we also help these companies reach out to different organizations. So I think what we have here is a winning formula to help these companies. And above that, we also partnered with, and in fact, here with us at the park, a very well-known and respected incubator called Shara, which means sail in Arabic, sail of a boat. So they help the companies grow. One of the largest, I would call, in the MENA region. So of course, for companies that need that support, they are also here. So what we can do is hold the company, help it incubate all the way and help it accelerate, and maybe perhaps scale up into, let's say, UAE overall and maybe the countries around it.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Motaz. I'll go over to you, Ian. Do you want to add something? Sorry. Oh, I thought someone interrupted.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll go over you to Ian, our head of partnerships and learning. I'm going to ask you how SRTIP partners with organizations to bring new technologies to the region.
Thanks very much, Hazel. Great to be here, and great to be on the panel and to listen to our panelists so far. Some fabulous information there about the ecosystem in Africa. And my colleague Motaz has also covered some of the points about setting up here in Sharjah. I have two roles. We'll talk about learning a little bit later on, but the partnership aspect is to work really in collaboration with Motaz and his team in the business development team. Our role really around partnerships is to do one thing. The overall aim of the park, I feel, is to develop the park's and Sharjah's innovation ecosystem. So attracting new companies here to Sharjah, here to the park, so that they can work collaboratively together, complementing one another to develop new technologies, to bring new technologies to the region. So a lot of our partnerships are focused on that particular aim. And we have a variety of different methods of doing that. So if you asked me, do we have one strict process for developing a partnership with a company? Well, no, we don't. We take into account a variety of different things. It's really about our triple helix approach, and just to explain that in a little bit more detail when I talk about a triple helix. It's about an innovation ecosystem and what it takes to be successful. And that's three things really. It's a combination of academia, so all of that expertise in universities. It's a combination of government, so the government often has licensing, regulation, sometimes funding, sometimes expertise, sometimes need, and the private sector who often have a lot of expertise to bring as well. So often good innovation is about bringing all of those parties together. And our partnerships focus around that, really. We see ourselves as an enabler to bring all of those parties together to help companies, to help Sharjah, to help the UAE be innovative. So that's our overall aim, really. And as I said, how we do that is through memorandums of understanding, contracts, partnerships agreement, and they're often negotiated between us and the potential partner. So we have a lot of them at the moment going on in the park. A couple that I'm directly involved in is a partnership with a local university to develop a novel form of concrete, a concrete that has many uses around the world. So we're working with them who are providing the academic understanding. We're working with the private sector who are doing some of the construction work about building a prototype, and ourselves and the government sector as well, who are potentially partners in taking this forward to the market. So we're all working together to make this a success.
Interesting. You mentioned the academia part, the 22 universities that surround us, 46,000 PhD students within us. What connection does SRTIP have with academia?
Oh, very strong connection. Good question, Hazel. We have a very strong link to the American University of Sharjah, which is a local university here. It's a world-ranked university, fantastic learning facilities. And in fact, the whole of the environment that surrounds us here, because we're in the middle of Academic City, is just a testament to the support that's given to education here in Sharjah. So the American University of Sharjah is a good connection with us. The University of Sharjah, which is a big local university, all within a very close distance, and we often call on them in a variety of ways. So it might be for their expertise. If one of our tenants needs some professional expertise from an educator, so we can connect with them there. We also have a lot of graduates coming out of those universities that often are looking for jobs. So we can connect our tenants with those people. Sorry, my phone is off. Turning my phone down. And there are a variety of other universities, both here in Sharjah, and we also have connections with international universities as well.
Interesting part. And just maybe briefly, we have one of the biggest makerspace within the park itself called the Soil Lab. If you can tell us a little bit more about the facility, Ian.
Yeah, it's called the Soil Lab. That stands for Sharjah Open Innovation Lab. And it really is one of the support services that we offer to the tenants here at the park and to our community in and around Sharjah. So it is a makerspace, and for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is, it's a place that people can come and make things. It's somewhere where you can come and prototype new products, new inventions, new ideas. So it's fully equipped with a metal shop, wood shop, textile area, computer lab facilities, laser cutters, a fantastic range of additive manufacturing facilities. So 3D printing in plastic, polymer, and metals. So it's a great facility. And the way people who are in the park use it is through membership or through projects. So we can get into projects with our tenants or our customers where they ask us to create a particular prototype, or we provide the facilities for them to do that. And then those prototypes often go on to form part of an entrepreneurial idea that eventually becomes a company. And we also offer a range of workshops and programs as well.
Great, interesting. Thank you for that. I'm going to add on, we also run an accelerator program called Sharjah Advanced Industry Accelerator Program. That's one of the initiatives by Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park. And I would like to, last year we had one of the biggest of our cohorts, our third edition, which attracted 1,650 applicants globally, which is something unheard of within the accelerator community, especially for a third edition accelerator. And we had interesting innovations from different countries, and we had 7 companies that went through our acceleration program, which was quite interesting. Countries from Poland, from Egypt, the UAE, with very interesting innovation. So we run an accelerator program to support startups and entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world. And we would like to focus on African startups as well. We give them access to government entities, to corporates, academia, as my colleagues have mentioned, and connections to key decision makers within government stakeholders. We have quite a wide ecosystem of government entities, corporates, investor ecosystem that's unmatched with several innovation hubs or accelerator programs. And we also give them access to the academia that Ian has spoken about, the 22 universities that surround us, so R&D facilities and connections, and they can leverage our soil lab. We have one of the best machinery within the region in our makerspace, the soil lab itself. And also the location, as Motaz has mentioned, we are central to many transport hubs, and it's quite an interesting, and this year's cohort will be starting end of March and ending in December. So all those who are within this webinar, who are within our database, will get information as to when we call for applications. And we actually encourage applicants, especially African startups, to apply for this program as well and get a chance to be part of this huge and thriving ecosystem of ours. Right. I don't know if you have last words, and we'll take about a couple of questions from the audience to make it more interactive. I think we can take about 3 or 4 questions, Amir. If you can quickly check for me what questions we can pose to the panelists. Actually, there's one question here already. I don't know who I might address that to, maybe between Sigan and Dr. McLean. Someone asked, what are your thoughts of African startups relocating to Europe, USA, etc.? I don't know what to take that.
I can take that.
Okay.
So in answering that question, you need to understand the early funding landscape in Africa, right? And you need to understand that the majority of funders were foreign and are still foreign, right? So what then happens is that with every fund interested in pushing investment into the African tech ecosystem, they have their theses and they also have their criteria. And these funds also have their mandates. Although sometimes these terms overlap, right? But those mandates comes certain criteria that startups that are interested in raising capital from these funds have to be aligned with. And in that sense, even from the early days till now, you had a lot of funds telling startups that you had to be incorporated outside of Africa. So be it in Europe, in London, in the US, Delaware, it was made mandatory. So, and because, especially in the early days, you barely had a local investment community. You could startups in Africa, it's very hard to go to the bank to say you want to raise funds because the banks don't even understand what a startup is, right? And that or the interest rates are just over the roof, right? So it was almost impossible to raise from local funding sources. And because you want to access this foreign capital, then you have to align with that mandate. And we have seen, and this is all across Africa. So we've seen a lot of so-called African startups now incorporated outside of Africa because they want to access capital. So it's more of, it's either you do that or you go look for some alternative, non-dilutive sources of capital to fund your startup or your business. And as you know, the definition of startup itself is a company in the in the first stages of operations, right? With a unique solution that they believe has a demand. So, and with that comes a lot of pressure to fund those operations, and that's why a lot of startups had to align with these criteria or not get funded.
Oh, wow.
We're grateful today that we're seeing a rising local investment community. We believe there's a lot that can still be done, right? But right now, the case still remains that a lot of funds make it mandatory for you to be incorporated in the US. And that's for a lot of reasons, because there is a debate where you have some people saying, oh, that's a bias. It shouldn't be so. Why don't you allow African startups to incorporate in Africa, right? But you need to also understand that there are a lot of challenges that are still being faced in the African economy, right? And for example, things like exit, right? How do these funds enter and how do they exit? Is that a seamless process? Things like legal system in the areas of litigations and the likes. So that's why a lot of funds just said, hey, you know what? We want you to be incorporated where we believe things are actually working at a faster pace or at a more efficient level, and then you see a lot of startups being incorporated outside. And so there's now the debate or the question, are these companies truly African, or are they where they're incorporated?
Interesting. And I see a lot of funding questions. Where can we get funding? How best can we set up? And maybe Motaz, would you like to address the funding question if for startups and entrepreneurs that want to set up here in the UAE, and maybe more specifically here at SRTIP?
Absolutely. When it comes to SRTIP as a park, I answered the question, let's say, to a couple of individuals online. We have a network of angel investors. Some of them actually reside here with us at the park, and we have a network of venture capitalists, okay, or VCs. As well as here, which is a big thing also that happens here in the region, is family offices. Okay, so family offices might be interested also in an opportunity, and they may invest directly into it. You know, we have an example of a company that does VR, AR, and XR. You know, combination of both. So you know, we managed to get a, let's say, family office to invest in this company to help them grow. Of course, as a park, we cannot help everybody online. I mean, we usually help, you know, the companies that are established here. Established meaning established in UAE. I mean, the company has to be present here for us to have the basis, you know, to support them. You know, so we can't, of course, get anyone from online asking for, let's say, funding or support. And I'm sure this is a logical and defining criteria. At the same time, I don't want any company that is, let's say, at this stage, not willing to move into this region to participate in the accelerators. Okay, so these accelerators give you an opportunity to participate from wherever you are. Okay, and Hazel, as you're aware, you know, we ran a very successful accelerator. And we had the winners, you know, they received cash and cash equivalent and so on, which helped them come into the region and set up and so on. So it depends on where the company is, okay? So if the company is willing to move into this region, absolutely, you know, this is a fast-growing region, okay? So you have UAE, you have Saudi Arabia, and so on, okay, in the region. So it's very strong. So if you have the ability to, let's say, move into the region and establish yourself here, absolutely do so. And perhaps you can open yourself up, you know, or we can connect you to our network, and then we take it from there. For those that are still there, maybe they don't have an MVP, maybe they're not ready to, let's say, scale into this region, perhaps you can participate in these accelerators. I mean, we had online participants and so on, and so again, you have different options.
Absolutely great. And maybe to add on that, from our virtual participants from the accelerator program, some of them that we matched with corporates that are here are actually still continuing being mentored with the corporates and getting business from these corporates that we matched them with. So it doesn't matter where you are based. Through initiatives like the accelerator program, you can be able to access our investor ecosystem, our corporate and connections, government connection entities as well. And there's another question, I think this is also directed to either Motaz or Ian. Is there qualifying criteria for the startup to join the hub?
Maybe if you allow me, Ian, just a quick thing. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, the company can not even have an MVP. They have an idea, they want to come set up and then grow it here. I mean, that could be one. A company can have an MVP or a minimum viable product, you know, something that they manufactured or a service or so on. They can also come here and establish. Now, when it comes to funding, of course, that's a different case. I don't want to always associate startups with funding, because some startups may not need funding, but for those that may need, again, you have the angel investors and the family offices that usually invest in smaller, what we call pre-seed, for those that are familiar, pre-seed companies. Okay, and then you have, the VCs or venture capitalists are the ones that invest in companies that are a bit more established, a bit more defined, a bit more, they have a good structure, to grow. So I hope this answers the question. I mean, there is no criteria. So, but if you're talking specifically like an accelerator, our criteria for the accelerator is that the company should have an MVP. Okay, some accelerators may not ask for that. In our case, it has an MVP. It has to be able. The company has to have the will to scale. Whether to scale into this country or scale outside of this country, because this is who we're looking for. But this morning, we had the Shell accelerator run out of our park, okay? And their criteria was completely different. It was companies that are only in UAE, they're located in UAE, and want to expand within the UAE, okay? So it just depends. There's all kinds of different accelerators with a different focus. But in terms of a company, you just have to see which one you would fit in. And for our sake, let's say as a park, we welcome everybody and at different stages. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ian.
Yes, just a quick point, really, in terms of what you mentioned. If someone has an idea, an MVP, and they want to then come and prototype that, then we have the facility here to do that. So this Soilab can provide a very reasonable membership. And the information and support someone might need to develop their idea into a viable prototype that you could then use to pitch to investors or to other businesses. So that is a really very valuable and fairly unique offer, I think, for anyone who's considering setting up in the park, is the access to our Open Innovation Lab. It's a fabulous space. Thank you, Mortez.
Great stuff. And Justin, I think for the purpose, we're almost time to the close of the webinar. Just in closing, Dr. McLean, Shigan, Ian, Mortez, if you have any last words that you'd like to say to our attendees.
Yeah, so I think if I can kickstart perhaps 3 points. The first one is really to appreciate the importance of context. I think context in innovation is very vital. I mean, there was a question that was asked around also avoiding African startups being followers. And much of the context is the fact that there is very little R&D investment in the continent. And therefore, there's a need to increase R&D investments by governments and private sector in the continent, so that we can then start to lead in terms of actually innovating and not, following. And I think we heard from Shigan as well, the example of, innovating for the local context. The same thing with Uber. When it started, it was credit cards. But today in Uber, in African countries, you can pay cash. So that's the first part. And also, then context then also determines the importance of the business models. And therefore, also, when we look at these cross-border collaborations, it's important also to get an appreciation of context and, where possible, to also set up soft lending, programs, and also be in country so that you assist the companies to actually innovate for the problems that they're solving in the country, whilst at the same time preparing the founders, to scale. The second point is just to also appreciate the big market, which is Africa, and also looking within the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is going to open up a huge market, and therefore the need to really look at how we partner and bring on board, offshore companies into the continent to then be part of this market that opens up. And I think the last point is also the point that we've touched on gender, and it's something that we have to be deliberate about. We cannot leave it to chance. We have to be quite deliberate in terms of how we, look at inclusivity, particularly from a gender point of view. But otherwise, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this panel.
Absolutely, pleasure. Sigan, any last words?
So what I would just like to say is that we should endeavor that we build unique solutions. We know we're in a bear market, but we'll always have bear markets. And good companies are able to raise capital, both in bull and bear markets, both in the good times and the bad times. Speaking on the statement about followership, there's been a lot of copy and paste, not necessarily bad, but what happens then in the bear market is that investors now take the best of copy and pasted solutions, but we should be unique, right? Looking at how to solve local problems, and with that, there are just so many. So always keep your uniqueness and follow through. Thank you.
Absolutely, Motaz.
Okay, for me, I'm not going to talk about the idea of the company. Okay, you have identified the idea. Okay, whether you're pitching for a service or a product and so on. Okay, you already defined that, whether it was for Africa or this region and so on. But here's something that we see from our perspective as a park. Okay, we see companies having a brilliant idea or a brilliant service, but they're not packaged well as a company to take it forward. Okay, so you could have a brilliant idea, but they lack, let's say, the sales aspect or the marketing aspect or the finance aspect or the team building aspect, and this is why we see some companies fail, and sometimes it's almost depressing. Sometimes we get to see companies that don't understand their target market. We had a company that was just had an amazing, brilliant idea, but their focus and their target market is completely off. Everyone is thinking this company should be focused on this rather than what they are talking about. So my advice is you have to be a full package to survive and grow, okay? Especially in this environment, okay? Take advantage of what's out there. Take advantage of incubators, okay? The incubators, a lot of them, you could just participate without funds, without, let's say, cost you. Take advantage of that. Take advantage of accelerators. Our accelerator, we connected, after we narrowed it down to, I think, I don't remember, like 30 companies or so. We took these companies and we connected them to one to Intel, one to Shell, one to, it was different organizations that gave them mentorships. Take advantage of what's out there for you, and don't think you can take the whole idea and, by yourself. Play the game right, to be able to survive and hopefully scale up and progress.
Absolutely. Great. Ian?
I think that was a great point, Motaz, and definitely from my experience, that advice can really help a company be successful. And sometimes people rest on their idea, think this is a fabulous idea, it's going to sell itself. And it never does. You need all the other things to make it successful. So I won't mention any more about that. I think Motaz has really covered it. I'd just maybe like to finish by talking about my experience here in Sharjah. I've been in the UAE now for about 17 years. It's a fabulous place. I think, like Africa, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for the Middle East as a region, but definitely for the UAE and definitely, I think, for Sharjah. So anyone who's thinking about looking outside of Africa and looking where to set up, I would definitely encourage you to think about the UAE and also Sharjah and our park. I think it's got a lot to offer, and we'd be very pleased and happy to talk to anyone who has that aspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. There are so many questions. I think 52 questions. And I don't think we can cover all of them today, but we'll make sure that we'll respond to you in the next couple of days. We'll respond to each and every one of you. And thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to engaging with you again. We're planning on a series of Africa-focused webinars with Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park, and to discuss more on the innovations and the breakthroughs from African startup, and of course the female founders that we want to encourage to come up to par, and also the many initiatives that the UAE itself and also Sharjah have to offer. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great, lovely day or night, wherever you're joining us from, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Hazel.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all. Thank you.
You know,